Hi, how you doing? This is the Gamertron and welcome back to the Gamertron Show and welcome to a Patreon requested video. I am a man of my word when I say if you become a patron and request a video on Patreon, then that video shall be made, and today one of my wonderful patrons has asked that I make a video talking about silent protagonists and voiced protagonists. In video games, this is an excellent topic for discussion, as there are a great deal of dynamics that go into both different types of protagonists in gaming. We have several different examples, several different games, several different protagonists to pick from and talk about the dynamics between the two, the positives and negatives. What's cool and what's not so cool about both. Because when you really think about it, a silent protagonist and a voice protagonist affect the game greatly in very different ways. Let's talk first about silent protagonists. This is one of the most used character traits used in gaming. The objective of this, many developers have stated, is to make the protagonist mute, silent, kind of a blank slate, is in order for the player to become more attached, more immersed, more involved in the world. Because when you're not playing as another character, when you're not playing as another individual with their own thoughts, ideals, memories, character and personality, when you have just a blank, silent slate that you can just insert yourself into, the player can experience and enjoy the game more by hopefully receiving the feeling of that they are a part of the world, that they are a part of the game, that they are that character, and that these characters interacting with the silent protagonists are actually interacting with them. And on paper, this is a great concept, and it has been done well before in a great deal of games, but there are also a great deal of games where the silent protagonist is kind of almost an actual hindrance on the game. For instance, a personal example, Dishonored. I love Dishonored, but one of my biggest gripes with it is that its protagonist, Corvo, doesn't say a word, and that legitimately bothers me because this is an actual character who has a personality, who has a past, who has relationships with these different characters in the world, yet for some reason doesn't say a word. Even though he's not mute, he doesn't have his tongue cut out or anything like that, he can speak. He just so happens not to at very critical moments in the story. That is a silent protagonist not really done too well. Makes me really happy that in Dishonored 2, they actually gave Corvo a voice. And that will lead me into voice protagonists later on in the video. Right now, when it comes to silent protagonists, a good example, believe it or not, I would give is the Ghostbusters video game. The good one, the 2009 one. In that game, you play as a silent protagonist, a new recruit into the Ghostbusters, and this works, this makes sense. Having the recruit in the Ghostbusters video game be silent, be mute, actually helps immerse you in the game like you are the recruit. You can inject your own thoughts, feelings, beliefs, reactions into the scenario that the Ghostbusters are going through, and it helps amplify what we're all really there for when it comes to that particular video game. You're there for the Ghostbusters, you're there for the original Ghostbusters. You're there for their personalities, their character. And by having your playable protagonist mute, it feels like the Ghostbusters are talking to you, not some brand new character that we've just been introduced to. It feels like they're talking to you, which is an awesome feeling. Another good example, the Dark Souls games. By having a completely silent protagonist with no personality, again, just a mute, blank slate, which is also completely player customizable, you are able to insert yourself into the world of Dark Souls so that when you die, and you will die, when you die over and over again, you're not feeling sorry or you're feeling bad for the character you're playing as. You feel sorry and bad for yourself because it's not this character that you got killed or this character that died, it's you that you got killed, it's you that died. And when you make progress, when you beat a boss, when you beat a Dark Souls game, you don't feel like you went through a journey with this character, you feel like you went through this journey. And that's an amazing feeling. However, having a mute and silent protagonist can also be used to create and develop a unique character. It's rare, it's rarely done and it's rarely done well, but the best, most recent example I can give is from my new favorite video game of all time, Doom, the Doom Marine, the Doom Slayer. Even though he doesn't say a single word throughout the entire game, he is technically technically a mute character, a silent protagonist, he is still a character, he is still a person, he still has a personality. Just through his actions, just through the movements and gestures of his body, his arms, his hands, you can decipher and see a character here, even though he doesn't say a single word. By just watching how the Doom Marine, the Doomslayer, interacts and reacts to his environment around him says so much about his character. He's angry, he's brutal, he's direct, he has no time for bullshit, he doesn't give a shit, and he absolutely hates demons. And you can learn all this about this character even though he doesn't say a word. So having a silent protagonist in your video game can absolutely work, absolutely be done well. It has its drawbacks. It really all depends on the context of how you implement your silent protagonist. If you give your silent protagonist a name, if you give them a character, if you give them a personality, and they don't say anything during gameplay, during cutscenes, well, it's awkward, it's weird, because you have these other side characters having conversations with themselves and with this character, but this character isn't saying anything, and again, it's weird, doesn't make any sense. For instance, in the Metro games, Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light, player protagonist Artyom is a silent protagonist, yet he voices his thoughts and feelings, he actually talks in the loading screens before missions. Why does he talk? Why does he express himself in the loading screens but not during cutscenes and gameplay? That doesn't make any sense, and it's a bit jarring. It actually kind of breaks immersion when you have this pre-built character who for some reason doesn't open his mouth. Perfect example, Gordon Freeman. This character is iconic, mostly for the games he stars in, but if you actually play the Half-Life games, it's really weird. Everyone keeps calling you Gordon, Mr. Freeman. They're having conversations with him, asking him questions, yet he doesn't answer. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's ever been explained in the Half-Life games if Gordon Freeman is actually legitimately mute. Now, when it comes to voiced protagonists, this again is another video game protagonist type that has been done a lot in games, but over the past few years has made a huge comeback in terms of giving us voiced player protagonists, voiced characters. And this, like silent protagonists, depending on the context, can be done well or poorly, and can have different effects on the players playing the game. For instance, when you have a voiced player protagonist, a protagonist who is their own character, who does or says their own things without the player's input, some people, some players, some gamers just don't like that. They don't like it when the character they're playing as does something that they don't want them to do. Like, hey, I have the keyboard and mouse in my hands. I have the controller in my hands. Why does the character do that? Why is this control taken away from me for this character to do something that I don't agree with? And also, when you have a voiced protagonist, like, if the player, if the gamer playing as the voice protagonist doesn't like the protagonist, doesn't like their voice, doesn't like the personality, doesn't like the character, well, it's going to negatively impact that player, that gamer's experience with the game because they don't like the character they're playing as. Even if you have great, solid gameplay, if you have an unlikable player protagonist, that will affect the player's point of view of the game. That's the real downside of having a voiced player protagonist. However, if it's done well, then it can do marvels for the game. Just look at the Mass Effect games. Commander Shepard, whether it be male Shep or femme Shep, is goddamn legendary in terms of player protagonist. Now granted, with the Mass Effect games, the player is given multiple dialogue options to kind of like build and construct their own personal Commander Shepard while still having Commander Shepard. While it's this own character that you're building, Commander Shepard is still nonetheless their own character. And when the character is well voiced, well written, it speaks to and connects to the player in a special way, where your player protagonist, where it's not only kind of a semi-alternate universe, alternate personality version of you, but it's also this character, this friend that you're playing alongside. And then we have voice protagonists who are completely and utterly their own character, no player choice, no player input implemented. And they are still characters that we adore and are attached to and fascinated by. BJ Blazkowicz in the recent Wolfenstein games, The New Order and Old Blood, Sam Fisher from the Splinter Cell games, Dante from the Devil May Cry games, Henry and Delilah from Firewatch. Need I even mention Joel and Ellie from The Last of Us, Nathan Drake from Uncharted, and the list goes on and on and on. These are characters that we love, that we adore, because they're unique characters, they're complex characters, they're well-written characters. They are well voice-acted characters. Never, ever underestimate the power of a good voice actor. A good voice actor mixed with good writing can create a character, can create a personality, can create an entity, a fictional entity that just steals your show, just steals your heart and mind. And add that with optional dialogue choices, add that player input along with the voice protagonist, along with a already built and well-made character. Now, I don't know about you, but I eat that stuff up. I love that. There are so many dynamics, so many different variables when it comes to silent protagonists and voice protagonists. Most of it positive and most of it contextual, depending on the context of how you implement your voiced protagonist or your mute silent protagonist, depending on the context of the character, depending on the context of the situation, depending on the context of the game itself, can determine whether or not that player protagonist connects with the player, immerses the player, entertains the player. Either way, as long as it's well done and handled with care, I am more than welcoming of future silent and voiced player protagonists. Keep them coming. And please, let me know who are some of your favorite silent protagonists in video games and who are some of your favorite voice protagonists in video games. Let me know your thoughts, feelings, and opinions in the comment section below. I love reading comments. I get nearly enough comments. Please leave a comment. If you like this video in any way, shape, or form, please hit the like button. Hitting the like button helps you, helps me, helps everybody involved with the video. If you hit the like button, if you want to help out and support this video, then please share it on social media, Twitter and Facebook. And if you want to help out and support me directly via Patreon, keep in mind, this was a Patreon requested video, and if you want to request a video and help support me directly financially, then please consider pledging on my Patreon and becoming a patron. Anyways guys, that's been a video, and I'll see you all later.